Hello, everybody. Um, I'm Peggy Burns. I am the publisher of Geronimo Quarterly. I admit that I think everyone has done, and everyone at Geronimo Quarterly has done an intro to a Zoom event from their own home, except for me. So today is the day that I'm lucky I get to do it. Thank you for joining us on this lovely, lovely afternoon here in Montreal. I hope it's equally lovely wherever you are, because as we know, in a virtual event, we're all located in many different places. And we wish to acknowledge that Geronimo Quarterly's publishing office and bookstores are located on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. Today is a very, very special event. We're here to join Jessica Campbell, and we're here to talk to Nicole Georges, who is a wonderful, wonderful writer, illustrator, podcaster, and professor. I think the only other person with that long a biography is Linda Berry, which I adore. And Nicole's from Portland and lives in LA, and she's been publishing autobiographical comics about her queer vegan lifestyle for 25 years, involving from punk zinester to still punk graphic novelist. And her Lambda Award-winning graphic memoir, Calling Dr. Laura, was engrossing, lovable, smart, and ultimately poignant by Rachel Maddow, and quote, disarming, haunting, hip and sweet all at once by Alison Bechdel. Nicole's also the author of Fetch, How a Bad Dog Brought Me Home. And she's also the host of the podcast Relative Fiction, Sagittarian Matters, and the Gamazing Race, which I'm totally going to listen to. Thanks, Nicole. You can find Nicole and her self-help animal drawings on Instagram at Nicole J. Georges or at NicoleJGeorges.com. So Nicole and I are here, as well as everyone, to celebrate the release of our mutual friend and colleague, Jessica Campbell's new graphic novel, RAVE. Now, Jessica's not a stranger to Geronimo Quarterly. She's a rarefied former Geronimo Quarterly employee who's now a successful cartoonist. A club that consists of Jessica, Rebecca Rosen, and our founder, Chris Oliveros. Jessica worked here for, I don't even know how many years. It was 5 years. She joined us while she was studying fine arts at Concordia. And I remember hiring her because she had worked in a bookstore back on Vancouver Island. And I thought that would be a helpful thing as in the publicity department. And she worked here. And it's funny because when you think about Jessica, you kind of think of all the times, all the good laughs you've had, all the amazing jokes that Jessica tells. Jessica's, as we all know who are friends with her, she's one of the funniest people we know. But I really had some really poignant and sweet times with Jessica, hauling ass across the San Diego convention floor in hot tubs, or even like more seriously, when I needed somebody to escort Linda Berry on a press tour in New York City, and I was on a medical leave, and Jessica stepped up and did the whole press tour with aplomb. And I think maybe she was about 22 years old at the time. And so then when Jessica left us, you always can tell when there's an artist working in the company, because you can see that they want to be able to devote all their time to their own art. And when Jessica left us to get her master's at the Art Institute in Chicago, we all knew she was on to greener pastures, and she hasn't looked back since, and we're very, very proud of her. Speaking of Jessica's sense of humor, her sense of humor was on full display in her first two books for Koyama Press, Hot or Not, 20th Century Male Artists, and her second book, Ecstasy 69, where she managed to sneak in a ketchup chip joke, which really made me laugh. But today we're here for her new book, Rave, which does spotlight Jess's humor, but it really shines a light on Jess's storytelling and cartooning ability, as Rave strikes a more serious tone of following a pregnant queer teen in an evangelical church. From the moment I read this book, I knew it was going to be a universal coming of age story. It captures teenage insecurities, teenage angst, and exploring teenage sexuality. But this week, RAVE is taking on a new urgency with the effects and at times stranglehold of evangelical Christianity in North America. Putting that aside, I don't want to speak for Jessica, but she has been speaking about, and I'm sure that her and Nicole will go into what parts of the book are based on her childhood and which aren't. I kind of love when a cartoonist does like their first full-length graphic novel, fiction graphic novel, because it's just so deep and so poignant, this book. And I was just really, really amazed. And it's fascinating to know somebody for as long as I've known Jess and to see their career and their art bloom like this. And I'm very, very proud to be publishing Jessica Campbell. So thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Nicole. Today's event is part of our Drawn and Quarterly Live series. So please join us on May 26th with Rumi Hara and Rina Ayuang for Rumi's book, The Peanut Butter Sisters and Other American Stories. And then on June 9th with Luke Healy and Connor Ratliff for Luke's new book, The Con Artists. And also, very importantly, we would like to say thanks to the stores sponsoring this season's Drawn and Quarterly Live series: Skylight Books, Floating World, Women and Children First, Lion's Mouth Bookstore, John Michael Kohler Art Center. And in Canada, we have Monroe's Books, which I believe is the bookstore that Jess worked at. She can fact check for that for me. And Librairie Drawn and Quarterly here in Montreal, and of course, the amazing Book Island. Please seek out these stories at your nearest indie comic book shop and or on bookshop.org. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for everyone for joining me. And we are going to now welcome Jessica and Nicole to the screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peggy. It's very touching to hear you talk, and just to I don't know, it is an incredible amount of time that we've known each other for, and so much of my comics education comes from you and working at Drawn and Quarterly, and it's like really special to get to be here.
I might cry, but I did do some quick math. And I was like, okay, well, Woody was born in 2007 and Linda's book came out in 2008.
Yeah.
So I've at least known, and Jess started in the fall. So I've known her for as long as the store's been open. You know, it's the bookstore or my kids is how I gauge my life.
Yeah, I think I started, you were on maternity leave for Woody, so it was before he was born, even. It's been a long time. And now he's like graduating college or something. He's like 14
He's 15
now?
Yeah,
15, yeah.
You can find him on TikTok at Woody.
Oh, cool. Check it out.
Well, thank you, Jess. And thank you, Nicole. It's very exciting. I wish I got to see the two of you more often. Just casually.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Well, hopefully.
I will. No one wants to hear the publisher talk, so I will let this talk. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy.
Bye.
And Peggy was right. Also, I did work at a bookstore called Monroe's, where the term that Monroe's employees have coined for themselves is Monroids. So yeah, if you ever are in Victoria, BC, I recommend checking out the bookstore. It's amazing. It's in an old bank building, and it's like totally beautiful. So I think the way we're going to do things today is I will start with a little reading, and then Nicole's got some questions. Then we'll jump into a bigger Q&A with all of y'all who are listening. Before I start, I wanted to just acknowledge a couple of things. One, today, well, first of all, thank you to all the sponsors and bookstores, many of whom I have a really personal connection to. Thank you so much to Drawn and Quarterly. It's a really special and meaningful to be here. I wanted to acknowledge that today is the Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. I recommend, if you have not done so, checking out the 231 calls for justice that were put together by the inquiry into that horrifying phenomenon in Canada and in the States. I also wanted to acknowledge what Peggy alluded to, the leaked advanced vote from the Supreme Court about overturning Roe versus Wade. I think that, like Peggy mentioned, that makes this book kind of sadly relevant again. An interviewer wrote me recently saying, well, this book is in the distant past because it's set, around the year 2000, but it really doesn't feel so distant, at least living in the United States today. Okay, with that said, I think I'm just going to start by doing a reading here of the first section of the book. Well, first I'll start with this quote, my favorite quote of all time, from Pat Robertson. So the quote is this is how the book begins too. Feminism is a socialist, anti-family political movement that encourages women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians. Pat Robertson, his mentor, was the founder of the church that I grew up in. So this is kind of the vibe of where I grew up. All right, I'm going to get into it. Amen. Good morning, holy people. Now, before we bless and release the children, I'm going to ask that the youth group stay for the sermon today. Oops, sorry. Will the children come to the front of the church? Lord, take these children. Bless them, protect them, and keep them walking with you. Amen. Now, today's sermon is called Remaining a Pure Bride of Christ. And it's a continuation on our series on love and relationships. This topic today is a personal one for me, as I have struggled with it throughout my life. Sexual urges, impure thoughts. For a while in my 20s, I'll admit that I did view pornography. I was enslaved to masturbation. But through the power of God, I was able to overcome temptation. Sigh. As you may know, recently my 15-year-old unmarried daughter, Amber, got pregnant. My wife, Dawn, and I have been praying for her for years, fighting for her. But Satan has been fighting too, and he had help. Booze, drugs, lust. But Satan didn't count on one thing. Something more powerful than his hate. Something you have all experienced right here in this room. God's love. Amen. And while it may have taken her hitting rock bottom, Amber has come to recognize this love. She is returned to the light. Satan's path is pain and suffering. The Lord's path is light and joy. Amen. Amber, the Lord has told me that you have testimony to share with the congregation. Please join me on stage. This section makes more sense in the context of the book. It looks kind of funny here, but okay. God's love saved me. God loves you. Even if you think no one could ever, he won't abandon you. Hallelujah. It's true that our Father loves you no matter what. Sin is built into our fabric, but we must try to live in holiness. Try to stay in the light. And one of the most important ways that we, as young people, can honor our Father is by remaining a pure bride of Christ, resisting sexual temptation. Now, if you'll turn to Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 18. The next day. Hey, Amber. Fuck you. All right, there we go. That's the first little section of the book. I'm going to stop sharing here. All right. It's so funny reading into the computer screen. But I'm glad you're here, Nicole. I'm glad you all are here.
I wanted to do the voices of the congregation for you. As she was walking out there, like, oh my God, look, she's pregnant. Oh, she's pregnant. She's Satan's bride.
Yeah. She's Satan's bride. Yeah. As all feminists are, really.
I love that quote. I'm so happy that you got that blurb from Pat Robertson.
Yeah.
For your book. That's a great blurb.
Yeah, I should have put it on the back.
Jessica, can we do a speed round? It's called Hot or Not. I want you to transport yourself back to your household when you were a teenager.
God.
Just tell me if these things were hot in your household or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Ouija boards.
Oh, not.
Halloween decorations.
Absolutely not. No, those go in the fireplace in my household.
Falling in the spirit.
Oh, that's hot. Yeah, that's hot for sure. That's a thumbs up.
Speaking in tongues.
Hot.
That is hot. Acknowledging Wicca or witches or the environment.
Oh, I mean, acknowledging them, I guess it depends on which way you're acknowledging them. The existence, sure, but it's to be sort of pushed aside, including the environment that's there for us to sort of mine resources out of until it's gone.
Well, I appreciated that panel. It's like, this is our dominion. MTV, hot or not?
Oh, you know what? I'm from Canada, so we didn't have MTV, but we did have Much Music. I think that was neutral. Watched a lot of Much Music, but yeah, it was not taboo.
Progressive.
Yeah, we watched a lot of television. Peggy's saying Much Music is not hot, but she wasn't in Canada during the Rick the Temp era. And Sukien Lee was on Much Music. Much Music was hot.
What about lock-ins? Is that what, did you have lock-ins?
You know what? There were some lock-ins in like the rec center, but not through the church. We didn't really do any lock-ins. Yeah, that wasn't a big thing.
And lastly, Christian rock. Hot or not?
Very hot. In my household, yes. Christian rock is number one. Christian book and music store, also very hot in the household. Also a sort of religious version of the Babysitters Club, because that supposedly was not Christian enough, called the Best Friends Club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There was a time when I liked Green Day, and so my mom tried to get me into MXPX.
Oh, I had some MXPX CDs. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. If you like punk, you're going to love MXPX.
Exactly. I named the planet in the last book, the men's planet is called MXPX, based on my favorite band.
Well, wonderful. So we know that you grew up in an evangelical Christian household. And I wonder, I know that kind of leaves, like for me still, if someone brought out a Ouija board, I'd be like, I don't know about that.
Have you done it as an adult?
No.
Okay.
I was so freaked out by them as a young person. And they were so like, that kind of like you're channeling the devil thing was so real that even as an adult, I'm still a little bit like, I don't want to, if I had a demon into my house.
Right.
So I haven't done it.
I don't know that I think like I've gone so far the opposite direction that it maybe would make me feel a little queasy, but I don't believe in it at all. I absolutely don't believe in spirit. Aaron's always talking, my partner Erin is always talking about aliens and ghosts and stuff like that. And I just absolutely don't believe in it.
What about, like, for me, and this is different from your church, but I grew up sometime in Catholicism. If somebody was eating a bunch of communion wafers in front of me, I would be a little bit like there's just kind of that superstition built in.
Have you gone to Montreal before?
Yes.
In Quebec, because it used to be really Catholic there, and is no longer. So you can go to the dollar store and buy communion wafers as like a snack. It's just, I guess that's the one thing that they're holding on to is the communion wafer.
Well, so all this is to say, with whatever queasiness still exists inside of you, what did it take, or what moment were you like, okay, I'm ready to talk about this or to blend this experience into my art?
I think it's something I've been interested in talking about for a long time, but it took a number of years to get in terms of like working in comics, at least, to get my storytelling skills up to snuff where I felt like I could handle it in an effective way, or a way that captured the tone I wanted. It's also something I've like tried to incorporate into I make kind of visual art, studio art out of textiles largely. And it's something I have occasionally worked into that work, but I think that studio art, painting, textiles, those sorts of things are so much more ambiguous in terms of meaning, or the meaning is more built through like association and like material connections and what the audience brings to it. Whereas comics narrative work, I think, is like so much more direct that it just felt like a more appropriate place to address this kind of topic. But it took a long time it took at least 10 years of me making comics to feel comfortable doing it.
Did the main character come to you, or did the events come to you first?
The events came to me. I knew I wanted a protagonist it's not exactly me, but it's this sort of like I don't know, like just a sort of somewhat neutral. I picture her as sort of like this passive person to whom events are like taking place, and she's responding to them based on, these voices that she hears through her friends or through church or whatever. So it was really, I think, the events that came to me first, but I knew I wanted that kind of character at the center of it.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you kind of where you end and she begins, or like what parts of your story do you see in her or the people around her?
Right. Oh yeah, this is what Peggy sort of alluded to. Well, I think, there's much of this that's kind of coming from my own biography or my own upbringing in the church, my friends and situations that happened over the years. I think that one of the dominant sort of feelings that comes to mind when I think about my own adolescence is just this like feeling, I don't know, like an immense insecurity and kind of like a lack of, just an immense lack of confidence, and feeling like I wasn't, even kind of entitled to have my own opinions on things. And that to me is like central to this character, or at least the transformation that she goes through over the course of the book. And then there are like really specific autobiographical or there's that one scene, I talked about this recently, where there's a boy who says, I want to get married and have a baby every 9 months or whatever. And that's a direct quote from someone from my youth group whose name I don't remember anymore. I don't know what he's up to, but yeah, that's like definitely, there's a lot of parts of the book that are pulling super directly from things I've witnessed.
My daughter just started barking. Speaking of unplanned pregnancies. Once I worked at the Disney catalog, and I worked with a woman who was like, I just want to keep having kids because I love Christmas with kids.
Okay.
And it was the same feeling where you're watching it, you're like, wow, really? How's that shaken out? I want to talk a little bit about the research that you did for this book and what it was like to be around you during the 3 years that you were creating this book.
Yeah.
I know you had to go to some dark kind of YouTube places to write the dialogue as spot on as you did?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the book, like this section that I just read, I mean, maybe half or 30% of the book is, sermons or yeah, people, the youth minister or the pastor or another kind of guest pastor speaking. And there's such a particular cadence to evangelical pastors, and I think sometimes you see it in politicians as well, at least in the States. And there's something very powerful about that, or it's like very evocative for me. And in that, actually hearing someone speak that way makes me feel kind of queasy, maybe like you at the Ouija board. But I wanted to be able to capture it really as accurately as possible. However, it's been a long time since I've attended church regularly, like not since I was about 18 or 16 even. So I went to YouTube and did some deep dives into sermons, and particularly I was looking at sermons about like women and girls and sex and things like that. And yeah, it was sort of, I was like triggering myself listening to those. But it was helpful. I like realized, one guy I was listening to, he was like, just kept repeating himself over and over again. Like, you feel me, or things like that. And I was like, there's this sort of like trance-like facet to it. So ultimately, I think that I conveyed some of that, but I don't know that I'm wanting to do it again ever.
Oh, it's hard. It is. It's like you're Frodo putting on the ring, and you're just like, you're like in that hellscape that no one else can see, and then you come out of it, and you're like trying to integrate into your life as an adult person, and not as like a woman who's in service to God, and then her husband, and then her dad.
Yeah,
Is that the order?
I think it probably goes husband then dad in that order.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like it's true, when I would come out of the room after listening to these sermons, I would see my partner Aaron or husband Aaron and be like, I'm just so angry and like miserable, which I had done to myself.
You grabbed him by the tie like in a movie.
Yeah.
I'm not your servant.
Yeah, poor Aaron. He's like, I'm just trying to play Mario Kart. Yeah.
I want to geek out for 1 second on your process. I just feel so strongly about editing in comics. And I know that you just have so much experience as a reader and as somebody who worked at D&Q and as a writer and a professor and everything. I want to know what your editing process was like and how important editing was to you in this project.
Man, yeah, editing in comics is, I don't know what your experience has been like, but it seems extremely difficult to me, because especially if you're writing a sort of longer form book like this, you can't just go back and put another panel in, page 10. You have to put in multiple pages to edit anything. So what I ended up doing for this book, previously I just worked kind of directly from thumbnails, or like an outline and then thumbnails and then the final book. But I wanted to adjust the pacing. I wanted the dialogue to feel real. I wanted the pacing to be a little bit slower than in some of my previous work. And I had conversations with a couple of cartoonists, Nick Trinasso, who did Sabrina, and Anya Davidson, talking specifically about her book, Lovers in the Garden. And both of them for those books wrote prose scripts and then thumbnails, and then moved into like a final stage. And I think I'd just been hesitant to work that way because I know, like Linda Berry just puts pen to paper and then it's like, it's magic. And, or Chris Ware, similar thing, like he doesn't outline anything, and they're two of the greatest living cartoonists. But I think for me, like having this extra layer of editing where I could started with point form notes and then kind of prose expanded from there and then moved into a script. It really allowed me to have another layer of editing that I think made the book a lot stronger than I'd been able to do previously. so yeah, I think that, and then there were, originally I had it sort of outlined as like chapters, but then I realized I could just do it without chapters because some segments were, I just wanted them to be one page, or other segments were a little bit longer. So,
Did you have a favorite thing to draw in the book?
well, that's a good question. I find that I think my favorite drawings on the books are the ones that I was like most, I think I'm lazy and I like drawing the easy things the most. I'm like, oh, characters' faces. That's great. Oh, here's just a scene with like there's like a white wall behind them. That's great. But ultimately, my favorite pages in the book, my favorite drawings are the ones that were a little bit, took a little bit more time. The drawing of Starbucks, or the
Beautiful Starbucks.
yeah, that's the Starbucks in Cook Street Village in Victoria, BC. If anyone wants to go down there. There's a drawing of witches. I drew one panel with a nib with some witches. That was fun. I like.
Well, that was
using nib.
beautiful too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also really like this messy bedroom.
Oh, the messy bedroom. Yeah. It's hard. I find it very difficult to draw mess. But it was important. I am a filthy, messy person, and my bedroom was much filthier than this growing up. So, oh yeah, my Starbucks. Yes. Shout out to Starbucks.
Warren, shout out to Starbucks. The messy bedroom feels very Julie Doucet to me. Whenever I'm drawing trash, I think of her. In a room.
She does it way better than anyone. It's like you can feel the grime of every room that she walks into in her comics.
We have some technical questions coming around the bend from people who are viewing. But I wanted to ask you personally, is there anything that if you could go back in time, is there anything you would tell your teen self? Or if you as an adult human could go and talk to Lauren, the character, what would you say?
Oh man. Just like, I don't know, just like that things can get better, that you can start to feel comfortable in your own skin. And I think I was like quite depressed as a teenager, and just the idea that, like now my life is, there are lots of problems, and objectively in the world, there are a lot of problems, but just like the idea that I got to spend this time at Drawn and Quarterly, and then now have this book published through them, and exhibiting my work. Like, I just feel like sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have the life that I like envisioned for myself. And that's really amazing. And sometimes I think when you're living as a teenager in a cloistered environment in maybe a small town, it doesn't feel possible that you can have the life that you want, or love the people you love, or live freely. But I think it is possible to do. I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know. Like, yeah, get some exercise, get sunshine, wear sunscreen.
I did want to tell her at the end, I was going to say, like, don't smoke. I know it's like so badass, and it's like, symbolizing your freedom, but at a certain point, that's just going to age you in a way that's not going to make you happy.
No, it's gross. Smoking is gross. Don't do it. I would go and tell my younger self not to smoke either.
I do want to tell you that once I was at a Christian camp, the place where when there was bad weather, they said it was Satan coming to break up the good thing we had going on. And we found some cigarettes in the bushes, and we wrote "Holy Smokes" on the cigarettes.
But you didn't smoke them. You just wrote it and then.
Oh, we definitely, I think we did. I can't remember if we did or not. I was too scared to do a lot of things. Like I had a hollowed out book in my bedroom, but the things in it were like rolling papers for, I don't know, tea. Like literally, like I didn't, anyway. Okay, let me get to some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Amy wants to know, will you talk about your drawing technique, your materials, your process? We talked a little bit about the writing and editing process, but what materials did you use? What kind of paper did you use? How big did you draw? That's important too.
I drew this on Bristol, 11 by 14 Bristol paper. It's great for cartooning. And I like, you can get it in either a smooth surface, which is like really as it sounds, very smooth, or vellum, which is like a little bit more toothy. And I like the vellum textured Bristol. I use a normal HB pencil, and then a lot of the inking I did with a Pentel pocket brush pen. I do think using a real brush. Well, anyway, I like the Pentel pocket brush because you can it's transportable. You can bring it around with you, and it has bristles as opposed to like, I have another kind of brush pen here, which is a Faber-Castell brush pen, which is just like, has like a long felt tip, basically. I used this to do the lettering, and that's because I was using a micron for the last book, and the lettering just wasn't thick enough. It didn't feel like commensurate with the line weight of the drawing. And then I used some India ink and a nib, but that's about it. It's pretty cheap materials for the most part.
Those Faber-Castell ones are so lovely the first second you use them. Yeah, and right? Then it's just like, it's like a real reminder of mortality. Like I've taught kids how to make comics, and I had to like give them, I'm like, do not try to, stipple with this. If you're feeling aggressive, don't use it. Barely touch.
That's what Erin said, that it feels like the pen is dying the second you pick it up, which is true. But I just found for the lettering that this worked better. It gave me the line quality that I wanted. But I wouldn't use this someone might be able to. I'm not capable of taking good enough care of this pen to draw a whole book with it.
I think you need to have a meditation practice. You have to have a real strong mindfulness practice to use that pen. Okay. Elizabeth wants to know about permissions. I'm finishing based on a true sequential art story that involves people, and I'm unsure of permissions. And the excerpt you read today, it was great, and it felt very real, based on truth. What kind of permissions, if any, did you need to acquire? Or is it allowable to simply change some names and locations and go ahead and tell your story?
I got no permission from anyone. And, but also I think that, there were some specific incidents that I was thinking about, some like traumatic things, like deaths and stuff that happened in my periphery and also to people that I cared about. And I really didn't want any of that to be, I just don't want to like further traumatize people or hurt people. And so it's sort of the sentiment of some of those experiences, but not any like direct reference to them in the book. I don't know. I think that's like, I don't think legally depending on where you live, I suppose, but I think if you're in the States for sure, and Canada, you're legally protected in making art. But in terms of like your personal relationships with people, I think part of it is using common sense. I don't know, Nicole, like you do actual autobiographical work that's like, you have real people in your comics. Have you run into issues with this?
There was a rumor in my family that my mom inquired about suing me with a lawyer uncle. And when I signed a contract for one of my books, the legal department at the publisher was like, is your mom litigious? And it just depends on what you were saying, the relationships that you value. Right. If you're writing from your own, just morally, if you're writing from your own experience, you're including them, but if the book isn't about ragging on them.
Right. Yeah, but this book specifically, I realized at a certain point as I was writing the script that it was going to be inevitably, I was going to get asked, or people were going to assume that it was autobiographical. And people were going to ask me like how much of it was autobiographical. And so initially in the first draft, the parents had more, there was like actual stuff with the parents in it. And then I realized like, I don't want to hurt my mom. I don't want her to feel like, because I was writing them as fictional characters, but it just seemed inevitable that they would think about it as them represented on the page. So I cut most of that out.
Yeah. I always change names. I make composite characters where I need to, or switch up people's details. Because you just have to think, what's the emotional truth of the story and what's important to the story? This isn't journalism necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The composite characters, like most of these characters, like Mariah and almost all of them are amalgams of different people. And even people like there's a biology teacher or something who, I mean, that's like definitely referencing my own experience of being a teacher where I'm like cracking jokes and everyone's looking at me stony faced, not laughing at my lame jokes. So there are parts of it that are autobiographical in that way as well.
Once I had a teacher in Catholic school who was like, today we're going to talk about sects. And we were like,
Mm.
yes, sects. And he wrote SECTS on the board. Sects. And we were all like, oh. Francine says, I really enjoyed your attention to detail, especially for era-specific style. The sequence dedicated to Lauren's makeover and specifically the eyebrow plucking was chef's kiss. How influenced were you by teen movie makeover montages, if at all? And I want to know, did Lauren continue to pluck her eyebrows? And as she aged, did they stay as small as they were in the 90s?
Well, I mean, I don't know what Lauren's up to today. I had quite small eyebrows for a minute there in the 90s and they grew back. They're like thick as ever. So that's good. But I definitely know people who whose eyebrows did not grow back. Yeah. Yeah, so it happens. So be careful I know the 90s are coming back around, but if any young people are listening today, wear as many tube tops and bell bottoms as you want, but be careful on the eyebrows. It may be an irreversible decision. This is, oh God, now I can't remember. There's this movie with Tony Danza where his daughter gets like a makeover. Have you seen, it's from the 80s, I think. She's got like curly hair and braces. And then he goes out of town and like his girlfriend or something gives her this crazy makeover, and then the rest of the movie is him trying to like swat away like middle-aged men from her. It's kind of disturbing, but I mean I liked seeing those makeovers in movies. I'm sure that movie would hit a little bit differently if I watched it today than when I watched it as a teenager. Yeah, I had a lot of eyebrow mishaps also. Some kids made fun of me for having bushy eyebrows a lot, but I didn't know. I tried plucking them and I was like, this is so painful. Surely this cannot be what they're recommending that I do. And so then I tried shaving part of it, but I wasn't sure where I shaved the top off. So they kind of like went down a little bit. It was really bad. It was a bad time.
I have no eyebrows. When I was at the Center for Cartoon Studies sharing a studio with John Chad, at one point he came in and I didn't have eyebrows on and he was like, excuse me, but do you not have eyebrows? And I was like, I'm sorry to surprise you, but no, I do not have eyebrows now.
Yeah.
This is all an illusion. Also, I want to say the makeover from Teen Witch, where she becomes the most popular. I really recommend it if you weren't allowed to see it at the time.
Yeah, I should. I'll check that out.
At some point, somebody casts a spell and gets great at rapping, and I can't recommend it enough. Crystal wants to know, when you're working on a book, do you put other types of art aside, or do you work on lots of different things at once?
I find it impossible to work on lots of things at once. I think if I were I'm always like, I feel like I have a really bad work-life balance. I'm like either totally working on something and like not doing dishes and like not doing anything except for working on the project, or I'm laying on a couch, or I'm just like cleaning, but I don't do anything in the studio. And likewise, I find it impossible to switch between making comics and then working, making fibers work or whatever. So at the moment, I've been focusing more on like installation projects and fiber projects. And then once I'm fully recovered from this book, I have a sort of hybrid project that's going to come up next year that's part comics and part installation. So I'll have to learn how to do it, but I find it super difficult to switch modes.
Well, Jessica, we're getting towards the end. I want to know, is there any question you wish people would ask you that they haven't asked you, or any aspect of the book that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think that. I feel like I've been getting lots of great questions. I really appreciate the questions that have come through here, and your amazing questions, Nicole. No, I guess I just want to say like thank you to everyone for coming out. Thank you for buying the book, and particular thanks to the bookstores that are sponsoring this event. If you haven't picked up the book yet, I recommend that you get it from one of them. They're in the chat, but I think it's Skylight Monroe's in Victoria, The Beguiling, Lion's Mouth in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I live now, the Kohler Art Center, Women and Children First, and Floating World, and then Librairie Drawn and Quarterly in Montreal. All amazing bookstores. The Kohler Art Center is a museum with a gift shop. That's great. And or get it at your local indie bookstore. Support small businesses as much as you can. But yeah, I think we've kind of covered a lot here. I appreciate it.
Jessica, this is a beautiful, beautiful book. Congratulations. I'm so happy to read it. I'm so happy. You're so funny and it's so sad at the same time. It's perfect for right now.
Oh yeah. Oh wait, I do see some questions in the chat here. Maybe I'll just, is it okay for me just to answer this one last question? Oh, Nicole's frozen. Okay. So this question says, the scene you read, it was so haunting, really took me back to my own evangelical childhood. How did you get away from the church? I wish that it was a clear and decisive break, but really it was something that kind of crept up on me over the course of many years. I got this job working at Monroe's Books, where I was asked to work on Sundays, and then I was also kind of, I had some interactions with my family that were where I was like questioning certain things about church doctrine and was sort of dismissed in a way that made me feel like thinking critically about the church was like not allowed. And I think that combined with having a lot of friends who weren't in that environment, who I knew were like good people and other than maybe some Ouija board demon channeling, they were totally good people. It all kind of like started coming together. And then I think also just like some of the attitudes about, I think growing up as a girl in the church, I felt like my position on earth was to like serve men, and just the idea that I only get to live one life, and I'm not even entitled to a full life or agency over my body. It was like so distressing to me that it just felt like it couldn't be legit. But it was like a really long, slow process to like fully leaving. And I don't know that there was even in a moment where I'm like, I don't believe in this anymore. It just kind of happened over time. Yeah, thank you.
I think that we're almost out of time here.
Okay.
But I love it. Everyone go get it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Nicole, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. And my daughter, Ponyo, just wants to say congratulations on your book. Everybody go get it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Drawn and Quarterly. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Nicole. I just want to let you know that we have Slack here at the D&Q offices since we all work remotely. And the Slack channel lit up when you talked about your daughter and picked up your pooch. Everyone was like, yeah.
Yeah, I wish Hoagie, my sweet boy Hoagie could be here, but he's at home right now.
I have to say, I really appreciate the mid-afternoon event for an old like me. It's like I'm like drinking a kombucha, and I'm like, oh, this is just great. I won't fall asleep, and I love it. So thank you very much. And it was really, it's funny when you read the interviews of your authors, because you really get to see their answers on the topics of their books that perhaps as the editor you were a little afraid to ask. And I also loved coming to the events, and having a professional like Nicole interview Jessica is amazing. So thank you very much, Nicole Georges. Everyone can find Nicole online at Nicole J. Georges and NicoleJGeorges.com. And everyone, please go out and read Jessica's book, Rave, which can be found at the following bookstores: Skylight, Floating World, Women and Children First, Lion's Mouth, John Michael Kohler Art Center, Monroe's, Drawn and Quarterly, and The Beguiling. And I'm sure you can find all of Nicole's books there at all of these stores as well. If not, you can always order any of them at bookshop.org. Thank you, everybody, and see you at our next D&Q Live.
Mm-hmm.